Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Hello. Welcome back to Guide London. My name's Fiona. I'm a Blue Badge tourist guide here in London, and we are bringing you broadcasts wherever you are around the world. This is our 6th week now of broadcasting to you 3 times a week at 4 o'clock on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. And we started these broadcasts partly to entertain ourselves, keep ourselves busy, if you like, because we're guides, we like guiding. And if you can't come to us, then we're going to bring the guiding to you. So we are coming around your house and bringing you all our fun stuff from London, our facts, our stories, and all sorts of London delights. Now, I'm afraid we do have a little apology to start with today. If you have tuned in specially to hear Eddie Lerner talking all about the Beatles in London, then don't worry. We are hoping to bring you that on another day. But for the moment, I'm afraid we've had a few technical issues with that. So we won't be hearing about the Beatles this afternoon. But as I say, we will get back to them when we can. And in the meantime, we have a cornucopia of delights this afternoon, because as guides, there is nothing we love better than taking people off the beaten track. And with these broadcasts as well, what we're trying to do also is to inspire you and to give you some ideas for the time when you can come back to London, and give you some ideas of things that you might like to do. There's 600 of us, Blue Badge tourist guides in London, and we all have our own interests and our own specialities. So we are kind of discovering some of those as we go through the weeks as well. And what we're going to do today is find out some of the curiosities of London. And to help us discover them, we have Danielle Harte. Hello, Danny.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Hi.
You're going to talk to us about the curiosities of London. That's right, isn't it?
Yes. So I'm Danielle Harte. I go by Danny the Guide. So at Danny the Guide, London, etc. And if you go on YouTube, you'll find out my speciality, because I love going off the beaten track, like most guides do. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk to you about some of those curiosities. I'm a newly qualified London Blue Badge guide. I got my results in the post while in lockdown, and that was 2 years of hard work finally achieved. But I'm also a City of London tour guide.
Yes, what I should actually have said when I said hello to you there was congratulations.
Oh,
because,
thank you so much.
You know, the course and the exams, it's a really tough process, and you know, to come through it now and come out straight into lockdown must be a slightly kind of difficult situation. And that's why you don't have, so you'll see most of us here sporting the blue badges, and Danny, as yet sadly badgeless. You've done the work, you've learned stuff, you're ready to go, but no badge as yet. Yeah. Have you got your city badge?
Graduation afterwards, I'm sure. So, you know,
and you will have a fabulous party and a lovely evening when that happens. We're not, but you are a city guide already. And so but we're not just concentrating on the city today. We're starting in Westminster, and then we're going to head east to the City of London and discover all the little curiosities. So away you go, Danny.
Right, so I've only picked out a few because there are so many gems to find throughout the City of Westminster and the City of London. But this is just really to wet your whistle, you know, and give you a taste of what you can really find in London that goes beyond all those major historic buildings. So we're going to start with one of the most superstitious hotels in London, the Savoy on the Strand. Now, the Savoy Hotel was one of the most luxurious hotels in London to open. It was one of the first. The reason being because it added the phenomena of electric lights, also an ensuite bathroom, and hot and cold running water continuously. Mind-boggling. Now, that opened in 1889, so it's there's no reason why aristocrats and businessmen from all over the world didn't come to stay at the Savoy. They wanted the best. And in 1897, a gentleman from South Africa, Johannesburg, was called Wolf Joel. He was known as the Diamond King. And he made his money in those diamonds, selling them often here in London. And at every end of his stay, he was famous for these parties where he'd have a massive dinner. And on one occasion, a few people didn't show up, which meant that 13 men are now sitting around a table. Soon the conversation turned to the gravity of the situation, which was 13 around a table. Don't you know that means the first person to leave this table is going to die? Well, Wolf Joel took it upon himself to be the first to leave to squash the superstition. But 2 weeks later, the news reached the Savoy Hotel that he was found shot dead in his office back in Johannesburg. So the Savoy panicked. They went into panic mode and they thought, oh, no one's going to eat here anymore. So they decided to add a 14th member to any table that was ordered for 13, which was a staff member. But you can imagine the pain that would have caused for aristocrats to sit with staff members, the working class. So by the 1920s, the staff said enough, and out of a London plane tree, a cat was carved. Here he is. His name is Casper, and he is beautifully Art Nouveau and sits at the table to make up the 14th member. You can see him at work in the bottom slide, sitting back with his bib on, and in the top picture, you will see him in modern day dress on the table, and he even gets a bowl of milk to help him through the meal. Now we're going to travel into the hustle and bustle of Covent Garden. Now in Covent Garden, there sits a church, and this is St. Paul's Church. It was consecrated in 1633, and curiously, it was built the wrong way round, because the entrance sits towards the east. And if you know your architecture for churches or you don't, then you'll know that the altar has to be facing the east. So if you look at the front of Inigo Jones's St. Paul's Churchyard here, you'll see in the centre, where there is a bronze plaque in the centre, that's where the door was. They boarded it up, and now you enter through the back, which is the west. And when Inigo Jones was building this, he was asked by the commissioner who commissioned this, the Puritan Francis Russell, to build it as plain as a barn. Now, this goes against everything Inigo Jones is about, because he is the father of neoclassical architecture, all that beauty from Rome. So his reaction was, okay, sir, I shall build you the grandest barn in the whole of England. And that's why it has the curious shape that it does today. Now, because it sits in the heart of Covent Garden, it's now known as the Actors' Church because it's theatre land, this area. So inside we have commemorative plaques to many great thespians and playwrights and composers like Vivian Leigh and Charlie Chaplin, Ellen Terry, and even a very, well, unknown actor called Charles Macklin. Now, Charles Macklin was an actor in the 18th century. He was the bee's knees, he was the headliner, and he actually introduced rehearsals and light script learning, but he also had a hot temper. And in 1735, a gentleman, a lowly actor called Thomas Hallam comes along, puts on his wig to go on stage, and alas, Charles Macklin stops him and says, "Oi, take that off your head." When Hallam simply replies, "No, it's my wig." And Macklin replies with, "No, it's my wig. No, it's my wig. No, it's my wig. No, it's my..." And this goes back and forth until out of the corner of his eye, Charles Macklin picks up his cane and thrusts it through the eye of Thomas Hallam. Now, Thomas Hallam does die the next day at Charing Cross Hospital, and Charles Macklin is up on a murder trial. He is being taken to court. But he refuses representation, representing himself, and he is acquitted. What's curious about the fact of Charles Macklin's life is he lives until 107 and has a prosperous comedic career. His younger wife commissioned his plaque in St. Paul's Church, and if you look above the writing, you'll see a face mask. Just look into the eye. Can you see that dagger? Oh, what a macabre sense of humour she must have had. Now let's walk around the corner. And we're going to come down one of the hidden alleyways that time really did forget on one of its side, Goodwin's Court. It was built in 1690 and then known as Fisher's Alley. But today it's Goodwin's Court and is used because of its historical context of being unique in many movies. If you've seen the new Mary Poppins Returns, Emily Blunt and the children come down this alleyway to visit Meryl Streep's character in the upside-down turvy world that she lives in. But it was also the inspiration for Harry Potter's Diagon Alley, as J.K. Rowling used to walk through this alleyway when she worked in the Covent Garden area. And what's really lovely about this alleyway, it has a few little secrets, gems from the past. Now I'm going to talk about the Great Fire of London for a moment. Now, the Great Fire of London happened in the City of London in 1666. And if you look at the next slide, you'll see a map that displays the City of London. If you look at the pink, you'll see how much the fire destroyed. It burnt down 85% of the City of London. You know, we spoke about this in one of the previous videos. So if you want to go back and have a look at the second broadcast guide London did, it covers it in more detail. You know, 13,200 homes burnt down, 89 out of 110 churches, St. Paul's Cathedral burnt down, and even the Royal Exchange, the stock market that was covered. Now, it also displays 200,000 people from London. And, you know, this is how London really starts to expand, including, you know, so alleyways like Goodwin's Court that we're in were built up. But to spring out of the Great Fire of London, everyone's favourite subject, insurance companies, specifically fire insurance. Now, the first one to come along was the Phoenix. And you'll see they used to put plaques up on the walls where you would insure your home so that they knew you were insured by them. So you have a fire, they see the Phoenix's plaque, and hey presto, they'll save your property. And here is a really rare find of one. You also have the Sun, which looks like the sun. You had Hand in Hand, which has a hand in hand. And then you had the Royal Exchange, which was the covered stock market, and they used their building as their emblem. This is the one you can find down Goodwin's Court, and it's quite rare. Now, what's really interesting is that these fire insurance companies all had their own fire brigades. You know, if your Sun house was on fire, but it was started by the Phoenix's house, the Phoenix weren't going to put it out. So they used to enlist Londoners as volunteers. And what's really great is to enlist a Londoner, you have to give us an incentive. And so they gave the men beer tokens. Hey, presto. But even more curious is that the insurance companies gave out the beer tokens before getting the volunteers to man the pumps. London burnt down again, kept burning down, but the pubs were all fine. But this bark that you'll see in Goodwin's Court is even more interesting because the very building that the Royal Exchange used here is the one they built after the Great Fire of London. But unfortunately for them, this one also burnt down in a fire. But the insurance companies finally realized that they had to work together. And so by the early 19th century, we get a fire brigade taking the steps to becoming government owned. Now, let's travel back down towards the Mall for a moment. Here is Admiralty Arch. Now, on Admiralty Arch, it begins the ceremonial road that goes down to Buckingham Palace, where the Queen lives and has her royal residence. Now, the Admiralty is next door to it, to the right of the building you see, and it was the offices of the First Lord of the Admiralty. It was built in 1910 as a commemorative ceremonial road for Queen Victoria's life. But now, if you look into one of the arches, what you'll find is a nose protruding from the wall. And this nose was rumoured to have been one of Britain's greatest army commander's nose because he was known for having a very big conch. And it was the Duke of Wellington, who is famous for beating Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. But he died in 1852. It can't be his because it's still there. So really, it's an artist called Richard Buckley. Now, in 1997, Richard Buckley went around about 30 to 35 times, plastering his nose on different landmarks around London. The majority of them have been taken down, but there are 7 left. And there are 7 in Soho. So we call them the 7 noses of Soho that you can go and find. And the legend is that if you collect all of them and clip all of them, then you will have wealth and fortune bestowed upon you. But you must be wondering, what was Richard Buckley protesting against? Because this is a protest piece. It was a protest against CCTV. So he's basically asking the government to stop being so nosy. Now, with all the wealth and fortune you've now acquired from finding all the 7 noses in Soho, where would you go? Well, how about a jewellery shop, just off the beaten track behind the Royal Courts of Justice on Carey Street? This is a Woodhouse and Son. They've owned it since 1912, but it was actually founded in 1690 when it went by the name as the Silver Mousetrap. So here's the curious thing about the Silver Mousetrap, is that you'd have mousetraps made of silver. But forget all that for a moment, because in the 18th century, fashion was coming over from France, where aristocratic women had massive headpieces. You know, they'd be wrapped around wire. They were very sculptural. They'd have jewellery in them. You'd have lace, ribbons, feathers, flowers, cows' tails, horsehair, human hair, and then it was rubbed down with sticky wax and beef marrow, all then dusted with flour to disguise the sculptural elements. It was nasty. But, you know, it was so expensive and so sculptural that they didn't want to just wear it for one day, so women would actually sleep in it to maintain it. So they couldn't lie down, they would sit up. Now here's your problem. It's a big sculptural hairpiece on your head with lots of animal products. It was a mouse's paradise. So the fear is that in the middle of your sleep, a mouse would pop out to say hello. So they started sleeping with these fashionable silver mousetraps around their head. And then they went down to the Carey Street to buy them. Now let's take a little gander over into the City of London. How do you know that you're going to go into this 2,000-year-old city? Well, the heraldic dragons acting as the boundary markers. Now, you may have seen them when you've travelled to London. You might never have seen them because you've never been to London. But when you do, look out for these beautiful silver dragons. At the front, they have the shield of the City of London, which has the red cross of St. George going down the middle. And in the top left corner, you'll see the sword of St. Paul, the patron saint of the City of London. They have only been at the boundary markers since 1964, but what's really beautiful is that they're all facing outwards as if protecting the City of London itself. So if you see a dragon facing you, you're going into the city, and if you see a dragon with its back towards you, then here you are going out of the City of London. But we're going to go in to a church called St. Dunstan's in the West. Now, St. Dunstan's in the West does have medieval origins, but it was rebuilt in 1833 by John Shaw and his son. The clock dates to 1671 and is one of the first 2-faced mechanical clocks in London, sometimes nicknamed the politician's clock, but that's for another day. It's also one of the first clocks in London to have a minute hand as well. And if you look behind it, you'll see 2 clubs hitting the bell, and one of them has a body attached to him. These are 2 curious figures that strike the bell at the quarter of an hour, so each quarter. They are Gog and Magog. Now, there's a lot of myth and legend surrounding Gog and Magog. You know, they're sometimes thought to be one person, Gog and Magog. But they also, you know, they appear in the Bible, and their link with London is very suspect. Now, one version goes is that there were 2 monstrous giants, the product of 33 wicked daughters of the Roman Emperor Diocletian, and the demons that they'd been intimate with. Now, as he founded the new Troy, which would later become London, Brutus, the heroic Brutus, who tamed the 2 giants, forced them to serve as guardians of the City of London by chaining them outside his palace, which is said to be now where the current Guildhall is. You can see the Guildhall just behind this beautiful golden carriage. And sitting inside that carriage, waving at us, is Dr. Andrew Palmley, who was once the Lord Mayor of the City of London. Now, what happens from the Guildhall on Gresham Street today is the start of the Lord Mayor's show, which happens every second Saturday of November. So he's effectively the mayor of the City of London, but not the Greater London area. That is Sadiq Khan at the moment. So the idea of the Lord Mayor's show is that they show themselves off. So they provide a paraded show for us. And at the head of that parade is none other than the city guardians, Gog and Magog. And they've been appearing in the show since at least the reign of King Henry V in the 15th century. But not these two figures that you can see in the picture, because they're from the late 20th century. Okay, now let's head over to Smithfield. We're going to go down Cloth Fair. Cloth Fair is named after the annual cloth fair that they used to have in this area that started on August 24th, but no longer happens. And I want us to go to number 43. At number 43, you will see a window, and on the bottom right, can you see the round blue plaque? This is where John Betjeman lived, who was a poet, and he lived there for 20 years of his life. Now, opposite were his friends, his neighbours, Paul Paget and John Seeley. Now, John Seeley and Paul Paget had been living there before Betjeman moved in, and they were a little uneasy about the proximity of all their neighbours, because this is a medieval street, you know, all the neighbours were really close together. And Paget actually recalled that the neighbours across the alleyway could see us carving the Sunday joint. It was so close that you almost felt as though you should hand a plate across. So that's why the duo swiftly bought up the surrounding buildings and they bricked up the window. But then they realised that was just as ugly to look at. So they invited a friend over who just happened to be a muralist and a stained glass artist, Brian Thomas. You'll find a lot of his work in St Paul's Cathedral. And he created a window piece. So if you look at the slide that you're on now, if you look at the bottom, you'll see lots of green plants. It's a really hard piece to make out because of the reflection of the window opposite. But there's green foliage at the bottom. And in the center, you can see a little girl holding a baby. On the right, there is a woman with her arms outstretched towards the sailor, which is on the left-hand side. And that is what our scene is about here. It's called The Sailor's Homecoming. Absolutely beautiful. I do recommend going to see it. And now for the final stop I will take you to. I want to take you to the Apothecaries' Hall in the City of London, just off Blackfriars Lane. Now, the apothecaries are part of the City of London's guild and livery companies. Now, these are institutions that have been going since medieval times. They have been about trade and quality assurance. But they now today act mainly as charitable institutions. Now, the apothecaries received their charter in 1670. And famous members have included the likes of Edward Jenner, who invented the smallpox vaccine, and even the first woman to receive a medical qualification in the United Kingdom, Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, who paved the way for the crime novelist Agatha Christie to get her assistant's qualification in 1917. But what you need to look out for, the curious thing, is that each and every livery company has their own plaque and their own coat of arms, and you'll see them on their properties. So here, if we take a closer look at the apothecaries, you'll see in the center figure, that is Apollo, the god. So the god of healing. He's sitting astride a white dragon, who is the personification of disease. So you have healing, battling disease. Now, on top of the helmet, you'll see a little bit closer, it's blue in this image, a rhinoceros. And here you'll see him in brown. Now, the rhinoceros, his horn was very, very valuable. And when powdered down, it was used for their believed medicinal properties. And when the coat of arms was being designed by the College of Arms, they'd never seen a rhino before. So they understood that it had a horn, but not exactly sure where. So you'll see, if you look very closely, one on the front, but then if you go behind its ears, you'll see another one sitting almost atop its shoulder blade. Very curious, eh? And either side of the coat of arms, you have two unicorns, also known for their mythological healing powers. Now, also unique to every livery company is the motto that they hold by, and it's at the bottom in Latin, and I will translate it for you as it translates to: I am spoken all over the world as the one that brings help. And now I'd like to pass over to my colleague Fiona to conclude today's Curiosities.
Thank you so much, Danny. That is fabulous and really interesting. Just while you were talking, I've kind of thought about the other sort of plaques that we often get asked about as guides around the city. But before we go there, one more livery company plaque, which is Cutler's Hall, or at least one more livery company building. And Cutler's carries on quite nicely from the apothecaries because it's another one with a very prominent animal. In this case, it's the elephant, because the ivory for a long time was used for handles for cutlery. So there's a long association between elephants and the cutlers. But mostly, I was going to tell you a little bit about parish boundary markers, because we used to have a huge number of churches inside the 1 square mile of the city. And nowadays, the parish, the area which is associated with each church, is not so critical. But in the 1800s, everything was organised by parish. The provision of sort of street cleaning, the watch, who are the kind of precursors to the police in medieval times and things, looking after the poor of an area, that would all be organised by the parish. And so still around London, you get plaques showing where the boundaries are between two different parishes. And you get them around Westminster as well, but there are more of them in the city. What we have here is the plaque for St Michael's Queen Hive on the left and St James Garlic Hive on the right. And what I love about the city churches is the way that their names almost sort of become like poetry, if you like. There were so many St James's churches in the city that you couldn't just be called St James. You have to have something else to identify which St James's church you are. And very often they take their name from the streets nearby or the trades that went on the streets nearby. And here, both Queen Hive and Garlic Hive. Hive is the old word for a harbour or a dock. So we have the street just across the road from St James Garlic Hive was where the garlic was unloaded from the ships. And another version of the parish boundary markers. Let's let you, Danny, relax a bit in the background there. So here we are, still in the parish of St James Garlic Hive, but on a different edge. This time we're alongside Holy Trinity. So that's the HT on the right there. And in fact, St Michael's Queen Hive and Holy Trinity have both gone as churches. We lost one whole swathe in the Great Fire of London, as Danny was talking about, as we heard about in the earlier broadcast. The Great Fire of London's such a big event in the history of London that it tends to crop up quite often. So we lost some churches then that weren't rebuilt. We then lost some more in Victorian times, and another whole swathe during the Blitz during the Second World War. So we now have about 40 churches left in the City of London. And that means some of the older parishes where the churches have gone, the parish actually still survives, it just gets combined onto another church. And if you want to, when you come to London, you want to look out for these plaques, you want to see how big they are, this next slide should give you a little idea of the sort of size that you're looking for when you see them on the street. So they're fairly small plaques in most cases. But I wanted to finish up with the Church of St Margaret Lothbury, which you can find tucked behind the Bank of England. Not too assuming from the outside. If you go inside, it's a glorious interior because it's got lots of different details that have come from other churches. As other churches nearby kind of closed down or were damaged or not rebuilt, some of the furnishings made their way into St Margaret Lothbury. And I just wanted to share this with you. I love this. In the 1960s, the full title of St Margaret Lothbury was this: St Margaret's Lothbury and St Stephen Coleman Street, with St Christopher Le Stocks, St Bartholomew by the Exchange, St Olaf Jewellery, St Martin Pomeroy, St Mildred Poultry, and St Mary Coal Church, which is just a little bit of a mouthful there if you're going to give it its proper title. And with that, I'm going to invite Danny back to join us.
Wow, what a mouthful of a church.
Absolutely, yes. And some of the church names, each name in itself is getting quite long. And then if you're going to string them together like that, it really becomes almost like a poem in a way. And it conjures up some of the trades that we've lost from the streets of London. And that's what's lovely about London. The history is very often only just out of sight. And I know that you're raring to go and to get out there and start guiding people around the streets of London. Is there anywhere in particular that you're looking forward?
Well, having spent 2 years getting this blue badge qualification, I want to go where only blue badges can go, and that is the Tower of London.
Yay! Well, I have to say that everyone is very impressed by your presentation today. Sarah Reynolds there, just not be so brave after just qualifying, so you're getting lots of love. And I have to say as well, the in the comments section we have lots of comments. I think the positive ones were mostly about the cats. We lots of love going on for the cat. We had a little cat smiley face. Yay. And some people pretty horrified by the mousetraps, which I think, I'm a guide, I'm not sure, Emily, what she was talking about there, but you know,
could have been. There's a lot of crikey.
I think is, as guides, one of the loveliest reactions you can get from people is when you show them something that is kind of is there, and you might walk past it without seeing it, or you don't know the significance, and then you explain a bit more about it and people go, oh my word, that's amazing, I didn't know about that. So oh, there we go. Hedvig from Hungary as well, thank you. And what I was going to say is I know that quite a lot of people catch up with these broadcasts rather than watching them live. So again, remember, the comments still make their way to us. If you want to give us comments and questions and suggestions for future topics, what we're doing is giving you a flavour of the different specialities and interests of all the guides in London. So the longer this goes on, the more obscure these broadcasts might become. But if you want to get hold of us, either Danny or myself, then Danny, your website is, there we go, Danny the Guide.
Yeah, and just as easily using that, you can find me on YouTube for more curious videos.
Absolutely. And if you want to find me at the moment, my website's still in progress, has progressed slightly since Wednesday, but there you go, I'm on Instagram at the moment. And with that, I think I should say thank you very much, Danny, for that fabulous stroll around the nooks and crannies of London. And thank you everyone for joining us here again on Guide London. Coming up in the next week, on Wednesday, we have the museums in South Kensington, the Natural History, the Science Museum, and also some of the first computer pioneers of London. And then on Friday, a special day, if you like. Normally in Britain, today would be a bank holiday. This year, quite so, I think, I don't know, it's unprecedented, but it's very unusual that it's been changed from the Monday to Friday, because Friday, the anniversary of VE Day. So we will be marking that as well here on Guide London, the VE Day special on Friday. So come and join us again for any of those. Keep your comments coming in, and thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.